All right, so we're just going to do a little coding example today. Now this is going to be on functions, hashes, arrays, conditionals, variables, kind of just everything in the intro to coding course, kind of putting it all together. And I'd say this is a little more advanced example too. So if you don't feel comfortable with those topics or you haven't gone through those videos or the basics of Ruby, I'd really recommend you go through those first. But if you have and you're feeling comfortable, we're just going to do a little coding example. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to pretend like you have a business which sells items. And our items look like this. And I can make this a little bigger. So our item is just going to be a hash that has a name, which is going to be a string, a price, which will be a float, a quantity, which will be an integer, and quantity sold last week, which would be an integer. And then I just have hard-coded these 4 items. Got our bread and butter, bags of chips, and hot sauce. And they all have these attributes. Actually, I did want to add at the last minute, we have an ID, which just is an integer as well. And this just needs to be unique. So I don't want to duplicate this in any of my objects. So notice how it's 1, 2, 3, 4. They're different from each other. So go ahead, type this out if you need to. I think it's good practice to type these out. You can pause the video, type this out. Then we also have an inventory, which is just going to be an array of all of our objects or all of our hashes. And this is a very common thing where we have hashes that have the same structure, meaning the same attributes, and then we throw them into an array. So what we're going to do with this, we're going to really focus on getting some functionality to work with this data and breaking these up into really small, concise functions. So here's some things we want to do with our data. We want to find the total sales last week. And this is just, we're going to create a methods that do this just for one item. And we're going to create a method that determines whether or not we need to reorder. And then we're going to create a method that prints info on a single item. And we'll look at some things about all of our items. But let's just start working on this. All right. So if we're talking about, sorry, 1 second. Yeah, if we're talking about total sales for last week. So if you notice, we have a price and we have the quantity sold last week. So let's go ahead and write out this function. So I'm going to let's just call this last week sales. Now this, I want to work for any item, so I'm just going to pass this an item as a parameter to this function. And what I want to do here is I'm just going to return the item dot, and then it was quantity sold last week. And I'm just going to times this by our item dot price, or sorry, colon price. So I pass it an item, and I'm just creating a function that just does this multiplication for me. Now with Ruby, with their functions, I don't need this return keyword. It will implicitly do it if I don't have it. It will implicitly return the last thing of the function. So I could go ahead and test this out. Just do last week's sales, and now I can throw this an item. Let's go ahead and do our, let's go ahead and do this one, our butter. So let's do our bread. I'm gonna do our bread. Let's print out our bread. Now this function is going to return a number. So I need to puts this out. And then I can run this. Ruby, call this app.rb. We got 23.6. So we're gonna leave this here for now, but this is one of the reasons it's nice to put this in its own function instead of just hard coding this wherever we need the price. Because now I'm gonna throw myself a little to do. I'm gonna say format better. Because right now we're getting 23.6, which is fine, but I kind of want that 0 there. For now this is fine, but I know I'm gonna want to format this later. But that seems to be working. I'm just gonna get rid of that test. Okay, so let's do our function needs to reorder. So I'm gonna do a def reorder function. And this is gonna return a Boolean, so I'm gonna do a question mark. Once again, this takes an item. Now I'm just gonna make up some logic here, but I'm gonna say if our quantity is less than how many we sold last week, then we probably need some more. So that's what I'm gonna do. So I can just say, remember this is going to return it, but I don't need that. It'll be implicit. I'm gonna just say item. And I'm gonna get the quantity from that item. Now is that less than or equal to the item of our quantity sold last week? Now this is an expression that's going to evaluate to true or false. So then I can test this one out. Puts reorder item. So butter, we have 2 and we sold 4 last week, so this should be true. Yeah, so that's true. If we do bag of chips, this should return false. Cool. So I'm going to just reiterate this time and time again during this. So there's a couple reasons why we're keeping these functions really simple and even creating them. Because this is just one line of code. We might ask ourselves, why go to the effort to create a function for this? Can't we just do this in our code? Well, there's a couple things. Right here, we're creating a function, and since it's simple, this is easy to test. So it's gonna make our code easier to test, and we're gonna be able to reuse this function quite a bit. And also, it's going to be easier to read. To me, this reordered question mark makes more sense in my head than this item quantity less than equal item quantity sold. It's just easier to say this, reorder or last week's sales. It's kind of more descriptive. So let's just keep going. Let's do our print item. So I'm gonna get some item info on this. And this takes an item. So here we can do something like, just kind of format this so we can do some interpolation here. Item, grab the name. And we can do like price. And then we can format the price, or interpolate the price. So item, I didn't close this one. So we can grab the price, item price. We could even do something like right here. We could do like a reorder message. And we could say like item. We could just use this, our function we just created. Do we need to reorder this operation? If we do, this message, we're going to return the string need to reorder. If not, we can just do an empty string. And then we can, maybe do the quantity. Go ahead and interpolate our quantity, and we can throw in this reorder message as well. And then this will just return this string. So remember, we have the implicit return right there. All right, so now we can test this one out. Let's go ahead and do our @bread. We're gonna put this out. And let's try out our butter too, just so we can see these messages. One thing you want to do, especially when you're learning to code, you want to do small steps and test often. Test early, test often. Because of this exact reason. When you test often and test early, you're going to catch your errors sooner than later. And I know since the last time I've tested, this is the only part of the code I've worked on. So it's going to be easy to find this bug because I really just need to look on here. And then I'm going to read my message, undefined local variable quantity. That's line 29. Boom. It's telling me right where this error is coming from. So this quantity is undefined. Well, yeah, I don't have a quantity variable anywhere. What I meant to do was grab that from my item. So I found the error. I'm testing early. That was relatively painless to find that. There we go. Got another little error here. I'm not actually saying my message. I'm just printing that out. So I need to interpolate that. Let's go ahead and try this. So both of these, bread and butter, I need to reorder those. I believe so. Let's check one we don't have to reorder, the baguette chips. Cool. So here now I get a nice little message. I can pass it my item, and then it'll give me the price, the quantity, and then it'll give me this message if I need to reorder. So cool. So now I have these three little helper methods. And yeah, we can keep going from there. I'm just gonna delete these, not so I don't mess up my console and get it messy with a whole bunch of logs. So let's now move on to working with a list, like kind of list of things, and grabbing all of this stuff. So let's say I want to get my items, but I want to get all of them. Maybe I want to get the ones that are out of stock. I want to get the ones that are in stock. I want to grab the ones that I need to order. So let's go ahead and create these functions. Now for the all, since I have this instance variable, I can just use my inventory. That really is that. I mean, I could throw this in a method if I really wanted to, which would just return my inventory. Okay, so nothing too much going on there. Let's go ahead and do our get out of stock items. Now for this, I'm going to use my inventory, and I'm going to use the filter method. The filter method is going to give me a brand new array of all the things where whatever function I pass in here returns true. So let's kind of look at that. So I'm going to go through my inventory. I'm going to do item. So for each item, what I want to see is if this block right here returns true, it's going to keep that into that new array. So I want to see, does the item dot quantity, or sorry, item colon quantity, does this equal 0? If that's true, it's going to keep it into the new array and it's going to return it. So to show you this, I'm going to use this P so it prints out this array, get out of stock items. Let's go ahead and run that. So there's my array with just that one object in it, hot sauce, because that's the only one that has the 0 quantity. So that's working. Okay, so let's do a def. What's your ones? Let's do our get need to reorder items. Now here I did this as a do end. I'm going to do this as another way, as we could do it in one line, just to kind of give you some different variety. So I'm still going to use the filter method, but this time I'm going to pass it a proc. It's very similar. It's doing the same thing. It's just a little different syntax. So I can do my item, and then I can do the function that returns either true or false. So if my item, so actually here what I want to do, I'm going to use my reorder. So I'm going to go through each item, and if this reorder function returns true, then it's going to throw this into the new array. Remember, this filter is giving us a new array, and then we're going to return that array from this function. Let's go ahead and print this out. So we need to reorder the hot sauce, the butter, and the bread. But we do not notice how the bag of chips is not in there, because that one does not need to be reordered. But yeah, this inventory.filter returns the array, so I really don't need to do that part of assigning it to an array and then returning it. I could just have it run like that. And this is probably a better way to do it, because that's going to be a little cleaner. But if it helps for you right now to understand that this is your filtered array, if it helps you to understand this, then I would code that in. And even if you want to put in the return right here as well, if that helps you. Okay, so now we're getting our need to reorder items, and let's do our in-stock items. Get in stock items. So we could just keep our proc here, but we don't want to see if the reorder is true. We just want to see, hey, does the item dot quantity, is that greater than 0? As long as that's greater than 0, that means it's in stock. We can test that out. So that, notice how we have everything except our hot sauce, which was the only thing that didn't have any quantity in it. Okay. So now we have these functions that get our items. Now once again, maybe we don't need to throw these into functions. But in my mind, when we use this down later in the road, get in stock items, that's a lot more readable to me than this. This one I kind of have to think about for a second what it's actually doing. But get in stock items, that really describes to me what it's going to be doing. All right. So let's do some print methods. So we're going to do the same thing, def print. And now we're going to start combining some of our methods. So let's do a print all end. Now for this, I can just, I can say my items equals get, what did I call it? Get all items. Or I should probably be consistent if I'm saying get with all of these. So I'm going to call this, change that to get all items. All right. And now what I want to do is, I could come here and I could do an items dot, each. Let's just do it right here. So let's do an items dot each, and I'm going to come in here, do item, and then I could put, well, I already have a helper method for this item info. Pass it the item. Then I can call that function. So I define it and then I can call it. And there we go. And then for instance, I could do my def, I could just copy that essentially and do a print, call this in stock items. And then I could say items equals get in stock items. I could go ahead and print in stock items. And now I'm printing my in stock items. But let's see if we can clean this up a little bit, because what I'm doing is, maybe I want to have like a title. First of all, items. And this one I would want to say put, in stock. So I kind of want like a header. I'm kind of like duplicating some code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and create a helper. And I'm going to call this print item list. Now this is going to take in some items. I could call this item list. And then it's going to take in like a header or a title. Let's call it title. And what I kind of want to do, I just want to do what we're doing here. So we're kind of copying this stuff. We're just duplicating this functionality. So I'm going to throw this into this helper. So instead of putting all items, I'm just going to put whatever they give to me in this function. So we're going to put title. And then instead of going through the items, I'm going to have them pass me the list that they're going to go through each of them. So now I can clean this up a little, and I can say print item list items. And then we can give it a header, all items. So I'm going to go back, delete that, and I'm just going to call this print all again. So it works the same. I have my header, and then I have this. But now that I have this print all items in this function, you know what I can do is if I change, maybe I want like a little thing at the end. Now this is going to change everywhere, wherever I'm using this print item list. So I can write code once and it's going to apply the changes in other places. So I can have my header and I can add some stuff here at the bottom. And now this print all method, see this print all method, really clean. It's get all items, I store that to a variable, and then I call this here. If I really wanted to, I could do this all in one line. I could say print item list, I could say get all items, and then give it the header. So I'm really cleaning up my code. So let's just kind of look at this one. Let's look at the difference. So let's say I didn't do this get items in stock helper. So I had to do that here. And then I have my header here. And then yes, I would need to add this as well. And then I do my each loop here. And that works, but which one is cleaner? What one is easier to reason about? I have this print all, where I'm using this print item list, where I give the items and the header. Or I have this one, which is doing the same thing, but now here I have to filter my items, like it's just harder to read. I have these puts messages, I have an each loop. But since I've created these functions, you know what I can do? Let's clean this up. I can get rid of all of this. I can go ahead and take this. I want to print my items list, except I don't want to get all items. I want to get my in stock items. And then this becomes, I can type the header here, in stock. So that it's working the same, but my code is a lot easier to read. And then if I want to do something like change, you know, this, how I'm putting out something, I only need to change it in one spot and it's going to work everywhere it's running. So now both of them are getting the double asterisks, which maybe I don't like, so I can get rid of it. There we go. Yeah, so now I can just pretty much copy these. So I can do, what do we need? We have our, let's do our need to reorder. So I'm going to say print need to reorder items. And this is get need to reorder items. Let's just say reorder items. Let's go ahead and call this reorder items. Yes, and those all need to be reordered. Great. And let's go ahead and do our out of stock. So out of stock items. So this is get out of stock items, out of stock items, print, let's call this print out of stock items. And let's just test this. Out of stock items, which is our hot sauce. So we have a lot of functionality. So yeah, we do have a lot of code. We're already up to like, 75 lines of code, but our functions are really short and simple, and they're easy to reuse. And we're setting up this kind of like Lego-esque style of like building these functions and making them more and more complicated and building off of them, each other. And now, but as they're getting more complicated, we're able to do more things. So, let's kind of start adding, and let's just do a little, just kind of a interlude before we do. But why breaking up, code is important. Did I spell that right? So, this is keeping our functions simple. Okay. Simple functions are easier to test. So I've been doing some manual testing. This would also is very true with automating testing, but even as I'm doing manual testing, I'm able to see if these are working relatively quickly because there's not so many edge cases. I'm keeping them simple. They're pretty much just doing one thing. So these make them easy to test. They make them easier to reuse. And that's good because that's going to keep our code clean. And then actually, let's just throw this as a number 4. That keeps our code clean. This makes it easier to debug. Six, it's also a lot more readable. Because one of the big benefits we're getting out of this is I'm really describing the functionality of my app. Because this whole puts title, items, list.each, do, puts item info, that can be a little confusing. What's a lot easier is just to say print item list. That's just a lot more easier to understand. Get items in stock is a lot easier to understand than inventory.filter and then all of that rubbish. Cool. Yeah, makes it easier to fix bugs. For example, we have a little bug with our price. I don't really see it showing up, but if we saw earlier where, if this is a 0, it's not showing it. So, but there would only really be one place where we need to fix that. So, and that would be right here. Or sorry, it's right here, this times. So, but let's keep going. We can fix that later. Let's come up with so now that we have this nice and organized, let's start adding some functionality. So let's do a reorder function. So let's define this. Def reorder items. So first of all, I want to grab the items I need to reorder. Well, we already know how to do that. So items to reorder. It's going to use really descriptive variable names because this is going to help me read my code later. And this is going to be my get need to reorder items. All right. And then here I can go through, I can do an items dot to reorder. Let's do a dot each. Do item. I don't have this defined, but I know what I'm going to want to do here. I want to keep this simple. I'm going to do a reorder item. I'm going to handle this functionality in another function. So I need to kind of define that. Because now this is making this simpler for me. So this reorder items, this really just gets the items and loops over them and reorders them. But as far as the actual reorder item, now I can just think about, well, how do I reorder one item? And let's say, let's kind of figure out the quantity to reorder. I'm just going to have this in a variable. And let's just say this is going to be the item. Let's just see how many they sold last week. So I'm going to do their quantity, item dot sold. What did I call it? Quantity sold last week. So for this, I'm going to do the quantity sold last week, and we're just going to times this by 2. So if we need to reorder, we just want to take what we sold last week and times it by 2. And then I can go ahead and get the item. And yeah, obviously here, like in the real world, like, you know, reorder, get shipment, there'd be a lot of stuff going on here, but we're kind of faking this, etc. So it's just going to magically work where we can get the quantity and set that equal to the quantity to reorder. So let's test this out. Well, how can I test this out? Well, I can print out, well, I can use my function to print all. That's the one. You know, I kind of, yeah, since I'm ending these all with items, I'm going to go ahead and just be consistent. Call that print all items. So I'm going to print all items, and then I'm going to reorder my items. And then I'm going to print all items. So what I should see is, you know, these 3 that need to be reordered, then I should reorder them. And then the next time it prints them, the quantity should be updated, and those that need to reorder should be gone. So let's go ahead and test that out. Sweet. So there we go. We have, you know, our need to reorder, and here we don't. There might be a little bug here because I'm looking at bread. It started out with 7, and I said items to reorder is the quantity times 2. You know, if I want it to be like really explicit, I might want to actually also add, or right here, the item dot quantity would be the quantity to order, or do like a plus equals. So I'm taking my quantity that I already have and then the quantity to reorder. So if I do the plus equals there, it's not like me. It's not wanting me to do one there. I'm just going to hit Command Z just to get it back to working. Oh, I have a plus sign right there. That's what it was. Yeah, and now that's 23, which might be more accurate because I had 7, I ordered 16, so I'm left with 23. Cool. And since I'm testing this often and testing it early and kind of looking at my data, I can find these bugs a lot quicker. So that's good. So it looks like my reorder items is working. Cool. So let's come in here and maybe, you know, add some customers. So let's add some customer data. And let's just say a customer, I'm going to create 2 customers. They're going to be a hash as well. They're going to have a name. Let's have them have a balance. It's just going to be a float. And then they're going to have a cart, which is just going to be all the things that they've bought. And I'm going to start that out as an empty array because they're just not going to have anything. And let's just do 2 users. And then our customers. And then let's throw those into an array. And let's just go ahead and make these instance variables. Not that it really matters, but just in case if I want to use these inside of functions, I can. Okay. So for this, let's try to make a function that is like a transaction. Oops, sorry, I'm going to call this function attempt sell, because there's going to be some things that, you know, might stop us from having a sell. For example, does the person have a big enough balance to, you know, buy something? And if they want to buy 3 of something and there's only 2 in stock, you know, is there enough in stock? So there's kind of some things we need to check. Okay. But so for this function is going to take a customer, because I need a customer to buy something, and I need an item, and then I want a quantity of how much they're going to buy. Now, the first thing I want to see is, let's go ahead and just see if there's enough. So we can do this pretty simple. Let's just try this. If the item, let's check the item quantity. If that is less than the quantity that the user wants, so maybe I should name that something else, like sell quantity. Or see, naming variables can be very tough. Let's see, what's a good name for that? Quantity, order quantity, something like that. But if the item quantity is less than the order quantity, let's go ahead and return an object here. So I'm going to do a success key. This is going to be false. This order was, or this sell was unsuccessful. And then I'm going to do a message key, and this is going to say not enough in stock. Cool. So if this happens, this is just going to return. And remember, this here I do need the return keyword. So this is kind of why I don't like how Ruby has the implicit return. It just makes it easy to forget it. Like, here I need it because I want the function to stop here if there's not enough quantity. And it will stop right here. So if this if statement hits and I return, then the function's done. It doesn't go anywhere else. I could also say, hey, does the item, well, so here I want to grab the cost, and I could say, you know, the item, I already know I want to throw this in a function just to keep this clean. I'm going to say def get cost. And this is going to take an item and a quantity. I called it order quantity here, so I should call it here just for consistency. This is just a function definition. I could call this Tony and say, you know, my return item and grab the price and times it by Tony. And then I could say cost equals get cost, pass it the item and the order quantity. This is something I see students struggle a lot with, is naming stuff. So here, let's just, and in particular with functions. So here I am calling the function and I am passing it an actual item and an actual ordered quantity. Like these are going to be numbers, because what I'm going to do here is when I attempt sell, here I call the function, I need to pass it an actual customer when I call it. So I'm going to pass it John. I need to pass it an actual quantity, let's do butter, an actual item, and then an actual quantity. And then I could, I can call this as many times as I want. So here I'm calling the method. So let's just follow this on this one call. So here I call the attempt cell, I pass it John, the actual John variable, which is this hash, the butter hash, which is up there, and this number 2. So what this then does is now inside of this function, well, now I'm calling this get cost with item and order quantity. Well, the item is butter, it's the second parameter, and the order quantity is 2. Okay, so there I'm calling that. So then in the get cost, I'm passing it the item, which is butter, and Tony, which is 2. So I'm going to do the butter.price times 2. So I can call this is like a variable for functions. It's called a parameter. I can call this whatever I want. What matters is what I pass it when I call it. But why would I want to call this X or Tony? I want to name my variables good and my parameters for functions well, so they make sense. So I'm going to call that order quantity. It can get a little confusing because then you start to overload terms, and I think this confuses students at the beginning, but it really does, once you get used to it, how you can just overload these terms, it does make your code a lot more readable. Okay, so now I have a get cost that just returns the item.price times the order quantity. So now I can get the cost here, and I can do another if statement. So I can say if the cost is greater than my customer balance, then I can go ahead and return this message again. I'll just return something similar: success, false, message. I'll say not enough cash. Cool. Let's actually, this isn't complete, but I think I can test this out. And let's just do a message here: in stock and in quantity. So let's have John have like a low balance so we can test this. So let's try for John to buy some butter. So what I'm expecting is, and let's just buy 1. He's not going to have enough cash. And if John tries to buy butter, then there's not going to be enough in stock because these go in order. So we're checking to see if it's in stock first. Let's just run this. And there we go. So this first one fails, or it doesn't really fail. I mean, it's giving me back the right message where we don't have enough cash. And then when I try to order 100, that's not enough in stock. So let's try with Jill. She has enough cash. There's 1 butter in stock. In stock and in quantity. And notice how this is saying nil. That's because it's returning nil by default. There's technically, since there's not like I could do 1, 2, 3. See, that's going to return 1, 2, 3. But since have this puts here, puts returns nil, so it's actually returning nil. But that's fine. We want to keep going anyway. But here's just another point. I can test this function even though it's not done, because there's quite a bit going on here. So maybe if it's not done, I can test, check this out. And maybe even this, I could throw this part in a, check, or something like that. Check cell. But let's just leave it in here for now. I think this is good because it's kind of showing, you know, these returns. I can have returns and functions and it stops the execution of the code. So if I get to here, I know there is enough in stock and enough cash. So what I'm going to do is just right here, let's call a function called make transaction. And this is going to handle all of this stuff. So I'm going to pass it my customer. I'm just going to pass down the customer item and order quantity that was passed to this function. Def. So let's define this make transaction. Just going to call these the same thing. And so now I can kind of, I don't have to worry about, you know, if there's enough quantity or if there's enough cost. I can just kind of, I can just go ahead and do the stuff I need to do. So I can say customer, you know, I can grab their cart. That this isn't an array, so I can push on. Let's see, I can push on a new object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just do the name, and I'm going to grab the item dot name, and let's go ahead and throw the quantity, and I'm going to do order quantity. Okay, so that's taking care of the customer. Well, actually, I need to do the customer, and now I can reuse this get cost because I want to figure out the cost. I can say customer dot balance. Let's do the minus equals here. So we're going to take their balance and subtract from it the cost. And then from our item, we want to go ahead and take the quantity and do a minus equals on the order quantity. And then here we can return, you know, this was a successful transaction, and, you know, maybe here we'd have something like a transaction ID or something. All right, so let's try this with Jill. So I'm going to just print Jill here. And then I'm also going to print, I'm going to use my print all items. Then I'm going to attempt a cell. And then I'm going to go ahead and print these after. And let's print this message just to make sure it was successful. All right, so now I'm getting an error. But I've tested this recently. So I know it's kind of going to probably be up in here or down here with this, with the code I've just written. But let's also read the error. These errors are very helpful. This one in particular is telling me exactly where it is. Line 118 in the function make transaction, and it's the undefined method quantity. So line 118, item quantity. So there I forgot the semicolon. Okay, so let's look at this. So before we start, Jill has a balance of 100. There's nothing in her cart. And she is ordering butter. So there's 10 butters right now, and they're $3.95. So this was successful. And then I look at Jill. So has, you know, $3.95 subtracted from her balance. And then she has her cart that has 1 butter. And then the butter has 1 subtract from it. So my attempt cell from this test has worked. And then we kind of have seen it also checks to make sure the person has enough cash and the quantity is good. So, but our code is getting, so we just print Jill, we print all items, we attempt cell Jill at butter 1, then we can print Jill and then print all items. So, you know, maybe I want like a, you know, get or print user info. This takes in a user. And then we could just say like user, or let's just do their name. Sorry, what do I want to do here? I want to grab the user and okay, another thing here. I'm calling these customers and then I'm calling this user. Once again, it doesn't like, the Ruby doesn't care, but this is something where I'm using different names for like a customer or a user. I should pick one and stick with it. So I'm going to go ahead and just switch this to print customer info. These kind of things do add up. They're not going to change the functionality of your code. They're going to change the readability. So I can say customer has balance. Yeah, let's do customer balance. Okay. Looks like I have a syntax error somewhere. Let's see if I can find it. Unexpected end. These ones can sometimes be a little hard to find. Line 112. Yeah, I can try to comment out the last thing I did. I don't think that's it. Oh, no. Okay, so this is one way you can try to find bugs, is just comment out the code you last did. So comment out and run it. And now this is working. So let's run this again. I can already see with this little helper I have in VS Code. So yeah, my error is somewhere in here. Let's see. Oh, I forgot the def. So now I can do something like this. It's getting a little cleaner. Oh, I need to do a sorry, 1 second. Oh, I still need a print here or puts. Print all items. Okay. I guess with this one, I can just, since I'm calling this print, I can have this do the puts. There. Okay, so I'm going to say print customer info at Jill. Jill has 965. It's not showing her items. Let's just come in here and let's just see what this looks like if I do customer and then do cart. I think that's good for now. We could format that later, but Jill has 965 and there's her cart. But what I'm trying to show here is now I have 5 lines of code. You know, I have print customer info, and then I can pass it a user, and this is reusable. I could pass this John. Now that works for that. I can print all items. I can do my attempt sell. And this actually returns a message. Or it turns like it returns really just an object. Then I could like puts out the object dot, or object the message. Puts, you know, the transaction ID there since it was successful. But my code is becoming more readable. Print customer info, print all items, attempt sell. Could maybe clean that up a tiny bit, but that's still not bad. And we've taken all of this code, all of these helper functions, and now we're really making them usable. So one thing that, one last thing I want to kind of go over is maybe how could we get maybe some info or like get some user input. And let's go ahead and look at that. So I'm going to make this function. I want to comment everything out right now so we're not logging anything. So I'm going to comment out or just delete all of these functions because I feel pretty good about them working. Okay. Cool. So I want to make a function. It's called get. I'm just going to call this get 1 or 2 or Q. Input. Now what this is going to do, this is going to pause our terminal, and I'm going to wait to get 1, 2, or Q as their input. All right, so let me show you what I mean. I'm going to say puts, you know, let's say enter 1 for, let's do this, enter 1 to show items. Let's say enter 2. Let's just do this. We're going to create a little menu. Let's do this to reorder. And then I'm going to do a puts Q to quit. All right, so let's just test this out just to see what this looks like. So please select an option, 1, 2, or Q. That just gives my user some good UI, but this doesn't do anything. It just runs and quits. So what I want to do is I want to check input, and I'm going to say this. I'm going to use this gets. This is something built into Ruby. Then I'm going to do a puts input, and I'm also going to do a P input. So we can see the difference between puts and P here. Now notice my code is not finished, it's paused. So now I can actually type in something. I'm going to type in 1, and then I'm going to hit enter. So here it's putting out the input, and that's 1. But now notice the P here on line 41, it's giving me some more information. First of all, it's telling me it's a string, and then it has this character, this backslash, which is actually a new line. That's a break, so that's actually a new line. I don't want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a gets.chomp. Let's go ahead and hit 1, and that's 1. And that's a string, so if I do class, if I type 1, it's a string. I could do something like chomp it and then convert it to I. That's an integer. But then if I do Q, it's going to switch that to 0, which I don't want. So I'm not going to use the 2i. I'm just going to know the input I'm getting back is a string. Okay. And then I can do something like this. I can say if, well, I'm actually going to do this in a different function because this is just getting the input. So I could have like a app function. And then I could say get 1, and then I can grab my input here. Input equals this. And then I can start doing some checks. If input, now this is why it's important that I remember the type. It's a string. If input equals 1, then I can say print all items. You know, if input, and I can do an else. Let's do an else if input equals 2. Then I can, what did I want to do? I wanted to reorder items. Else, just do puts, maybe for later. And now I can call my app. All right, so let's run this. So I'm going to hit 1. Sweet, so that shows my menu. Now, oh, I was like, why is that showing the menu again? Because I have that function right there. Go ahead and, okay. So I hit show all items, that quits my app. But maybe I want this to keep on going. But actually one other thing before we do that, one thing I haven't handled for, if I hit Q, well, I get that maybe for later. It doesn't really quit, but why I have this quit is I want this to loop, and I also want it to handle bad input. So where I'm going to handle the bad input is right here. So first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to check if input equals Q. Now I can do this exit 0. This is going to quit my program. If I do this exit 0, it's just going to stop the program in its tracks. So that's good, but also I also want to check something else here. This is another way I can do a loop, because I want this to loop if they don't give me correct input. So watch, I'm going to check to see if the input does not equal 1, or the input does not equal the string 2. I'm going to do this. I'm going to say puts in a valid input. Actually, no, actually I want to see if it does. I'm going to check to see if it does equals these two. And if it does, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to return the input. So I'm checking my two good cases. If it hits Q, I'm going to quit. If they give me 1 or 2, then I'm just going to return that input. So if they don't, what I'm going to say is, if I get here, I have invalid input. And I'm going to do something a little clever here. I'm going to call this function. This is called recursion encoding. That is a function that calls itself. Now, there's a pitfall to recursion, and that is a infinite loop. So if I have this function called infinite loop, and inside of there I call that function, well, this function is just going to keep on calling itself forever and ever until your computer runs out of memory. You're going to get a Stack Overflow error there. So what you need with recursion is you need a base case to get you out of it. And we actually have two of them. So if our user types Q, that's going to quit our app. And also if they hit input, if they give us invalid input, that's also going to get us out of this function because we're going to return there. But if they give us anything other than a Q, 1 or 2, we're going to put invalid input and then we're going to call this function again. So let's look at what this looks like. And I can actually even interpolate this. Let's say input is invalid. So we can kind of see it. So I run it. So I'm going to hit 3. See how it says 3 is invalid, and then it calls this function again, which then re-puts my message. Please select an option, 1, 2, or 3. If I hit Q, it quits. If I hit 1, it prints out my menu. If I hit 2, it breaks reorder items. Sorry, that's plural. If I hit 2, I reorder my items. But now I hit 1. Well, now it's saying I need to reorder. So, but we've checked earlier that my reorder items is working. So what's going on here is that when I hit 2, it reorders them and then it quits. I could show this to you that it's actually working by reordering the items and then printing them. So let's hit 2. It reorders them and now it's done. And now my app is complete. So we could do something similar if we wanted to keep this, if we don't want to reorder them here and we kind of want this to loop, is I can throw this app, I can do a recursion call here and call my app. So I can show all my items. Okay, so that shows them all, but then it calls this again, which asks me to get my input, so then I could reorder them. Now it's asking me what I want to do, so I could show them again. And see there, they're reordered. And I could quit to get out of there. Because the way how I get out of this app, because there's really not a return here, but there is one through here, through the exit by hitting quit. And yeah, I could keep on coming here. Maybe I could do another case. Else if, 3, maybe we could, order an item or attempt sell. Let's do this little object. Let's do sell result. We can just hard code this for now, so let's take it at John. Let's do at butter. Let's do 1. And maybe we could do like a print sell result method. We don't really have that. Let's go ahead and define this. Def cell result. Oh, it's called print cell result. And here we could do something like, so our cell result, what I'm expecting this to be, and this is getting a little hard, and I'll stop in 1 second here, but our cell result, I'm kind of expecting it to be this object with success, which is going to be a Boolean, and then a message. So I could do something like this, like if cell result success, you know, I could put like successful, you put say, puts our message, which would be our transaction ID, but this is kind of just made up message. Else and let's say unsuccessful. And you know, if I have this new option for you know, this 3, then maybe I want to add this to my menu so the user can see it. I'm just going to copy what's going on here. Let's actually do a 4. I could say something like show John. Show, well, this is, let's just keep it maybe at John, because now I need to handle these inputs. Now this is something where, you know, I would probably come up with this is getting a little, you know, I'm having to hard code all these cases. I think this is fine for now. You might want to try to like, see if you could abstract that. But for now, sometimes, especially when you're just learning, getting stuff working is the most important part. So I've just added 3 more cases where I can, you know, attempt cell, and then I'll show John. So let's add that case. So if input equals 4, we can like print customer info, and they'll be at John. So let's do a 3, attempt cell to John. Unsuccessful, but I don't get the message because I spelled message wrong. Now both of these if else, they're both saying this result, so I could technically just throw that down here. Take that, take this one, throw it outside of it. Not a huge deal, might clean up my code a little, but let's go ahead and quit, rerun that. Unsuccessful, not enough cash. Show John. John has $1 and he has nothing in it. So I think I'll stop here and maybe let you experiment with this some more. I'll throw this out in a gist on GitHub and throw it in the YouTube description. But yeah, like I said, this one is a little more complicated, but especially at the first part of this, we did a good job of breaking up these functions into kind of this complexity into small, simple functions. Then we reused those and built upon them. So then when we got to like the really hard part of like trying to get user input and doing transactions and keeping track of both users and, you know, our items, it was a little easier. And we can look at our app. You know, our app is very readable. Our input is get 1, 2, or queue. I should need to change that name to maybe just get input, because it's no longer just getting 1 or 2. Just kind of make it generic, get input. But yeah, if we look at it, input equals get input. If input equals 1, print all items. If input equals 2, reorder items. If input equals 3, we can attempt a sell. Then we print the sell result. If input equals 4, print customer. There's a lot going on here, but this is very readable. So let me just make sure I didn't break anything. But yeah, I will throw this out into Slack. And yeah, this should help you kind of put together the pieces we've learned about. So cool, that is it for me. Yeah, leave any comments in or questions in the comments. Have a good one. Oh wait, one shout out, sorry. Once again, this is Memorex Memories, the artist in the background. I've used it before, just using it again because I love it so much. I'll put that in the description too. Cool. All right. Peace.